Welcome back, traveler. Last we met, we watched the light fade. Baldr, the god of peace, the beloved of gods, was struck down by fate's softest hand, and the gods who had once laughed so easily fell into a silence that even time did not disturb. But grief in the halls of Asgard is never alone, it is always followed by anger, and when gods grieve, they do not weep, they punish. Tonight, I will tell you the story of Loki, the trickster who once dined beside Odin, the shapeshifter who once saved Asgard from ruin, and the lies that would become his last. This is a tale of pursuit, of judgment, of binding, not just in chains, but in memory, in blood, and in the silence beneath the earth, where even laughter dies. So close your eyes, let the fire burn low. And listen, this is Loki's last lie. The one who laughed too long. There was still ash in the air. Though the fire that carried Baldr across the sea had long since gone out, its scent lingered, burnt wood, scorched gold, something softer, the fading memory of a god who never raised a blade. The gods moved as if underwater, slower now, quieter, still not speaking of it aloud, but someone was smiling. Loki. He did not cry at the funeral, he did not sing. He stood at the edge of the gathering, arms folded, eyes sharp, mouth crooked, not cruel, not triumphant, but knowing. He was not cast out. Not yet, because for all their suspicion, the gods had no proof, only a name whispered from the mouth of Thuk, only the way Loki had stepped back. Just before Baldr fell, he wandered the halls freely in the days that followed. He sat beside Thor and drank mead he didn't enjoy. He watched Frigg walk through the gardens she no longer tended. He smiled at Odin, and Odin in return gave him nothing, because what can a god of foresight give to a liar who already knows he's been seen? And so as silence hardened into certainty, Loki vanished, not with fanfare, not with violence. He simply slipped through the edge of the world like wind through a cracked door. He ran, not in fear, but in inevitability, for Loki had always known that lies are not eternal. They are rented, and the debt was now due. He became a shadow among shadows, a flicker in the mist, a fox in the pines. He took no allies, spun no jokes, lit no fires, because there were none left who would laugh with him. But destiny is not fooled, and neither is Odin. The ravens flew, the storm rolled, and beneath the weight of thunder, Thor came. He did not shout, he did not argue, he simply found the trickster where he lay hidden among the rivers and caught him in mid-flight, a fish grasped by the hand of fate. Loki twisted, snarled, smiled, but he did not beg, because he knew the gods were not bringing him home. They were bringing him below. The breaking of the family. They did not bring him to Asgard, not this time. They brought him to a mountain, far from gold, far from gods, far from mercy. The winds howled there, not with rage, but with warning. The kind of wind that knows something terrible is about to happen and wishes it didn't have to watch. They laid him at the foot of the stone, not bound, not yet, because there was still something left to break. His children. The gods knew Loki's tricks, they knew he had sons, but these were not boys who played in meadows. There was Narfi, sharp-eyed, silent, restless, and Nari, gentler, younger, the one who asked questions instead of answers. They had not chosen their blood, they had not chosen his fate, but the gods were not interested in justice. They wanted retribution, and so before Loki's eyes, before he could speak, before he could move, they turned Narfi into a wolf. It did not happen gently. It was not a curse that whispered. It was a tearing, a twisting, fur bursting from skin, claws from fingers, mind from memory. And when the transformation was done, Narfi looked upon his brother, and he did not see a brother. He saw prey, the gods turned away, and the wolf leapt. The sound was not long, it was fast, wet, and when it ended, Nari was no more. They took his entrails still warm, and bound Loki, shoulders, hips, knees. The gods did not speak, not even Odin, because this was not punishment, this was ending. They dragged him beneath the mountain, carved 3 stones from the earth and fastened the bindings tight. He screamed, not at the gods, not for mercy, but for his sons, and the mountain answered with silence. Then they hung the serpent, above him, always above, its venom dripping slow and sure toward his face, the drops hissing as they fell, as if the poison remembered who it was meant for. But the gods, even in wrath, could not bury him completely, because someone stayed, Sigyn. his wife, his quiet, his end, and his echo. She took a bowl and held it beneath the serpent's fangs, hour by hour, day by day, year by year. She caught every drop she could, because love, even broken, does not always die. But the bowl cannot hold forever. And when it fills, as she turns to empty it, a single drop falls onto Loki's face. And then he writhes, he screams, he thrashes against the stone. And the world trembles. Because even bound beneath the earth, even with his children dead, Loki is not done. The waiting below. There is a kind of silence deeper than death. It lives beneath the mountain, beneath memory, beneath even the names gods dare to speak. Here in the dark, Loki waits, not as a man, not as a god, but as something else entirely, a flame without air. The serpent hangs above him still, tireless and cruel. Its venom falls slowly, drop by drop, and the pain does not lessen. Not after years, not after centuries. When Sigyn is there, her hands steady, her arms aching, the bowl catches the poison, and the fire inside Loki sleeps. But when she turns to empty it, just for a moment, the venom touches his skin, his face burns, his body twists, his scream shakes the stones, and the world quakes. They call it earthquakes in Midgard, but it is not the earth, it is a god, beneath the roots of the world, remembering what they did to him. He dreams sometimes, not of revenge, not yet, but of things lost. He dreams of his sons, their laughter, their shapes, one torn apart, one twisted into rage. He dreams of Baldr, his brightness, his silence as he fell. He dreams of that final smile, not because he regrets it, but because it will never leave him. He dreams of Odin, not as Allfather, but as a man who once called him brother, once trusted him with his name. That is the wound that bleeds longest, not the venom, not the stone, but the memory of belonging. And in the deep where no light can reach, Loki begins to feel something ancient and rising. Not hate, not yet, but purpose, because the gods believe he is trapped. But time, like chains, wears thin. In the world above, it stirs. The wolves are growing. The serpent stretches beneath the sea. The fire in the south begins to burn higher. And Loki, in his tomb beneath the world, smiles again. Not because he is free, but because one day he will be. The fire that waits. Far from Loki's prison, in the land where the sun never sleeps and the air is always heat, a sword stirs in its scabbard. It does not ring. It does not blaze. It hums softly like the breath before the scream. It belongs to Surtur, the fire giant, the oldest enemy the gods never truly faced. He stands silent at the edge of the world, one hand resting on the hilt of flame, eyes fixed not on war, but on timing. He does not rush. He does not waver, because fire is not a fool. Fire knows it only needs one chance, and soon the moment will come. In Midgard, mortals begin to dream strangely. Children wake screaming names they've never heard. Cattle are born with two heads, the stars shift in the sky, and no one can remember how they looked the day before. In Jotunheim, the giants feel a tension in the frost. It runs beneath their feet like cracks in the ice. Some raise weapons, some build ships, some simply wait, eyes narrowed, breaths held. Even Hel, in her silent kingdom of shadows, feels the tremble in the bones of the dead. She sits taller. She says nothing, but her hand tightens around her staff. And still, beneath the mountain, Loki waits. He does not count the years. He does not speak. But the rhythm of the venom has become the rhythm of his mind. Each drop, a beat. Each scream, a vow. He feels it rising. He knows what the gods pretend not to admit, that fate does not forget. It circles, it waits, it burns, and even stone cannot hold it forever. In Asgard, the gods sharpen weapons without knowing why. Thor cannot sleep. Odin watches the horizon too long. Frigg no longer prays because they feel it. The edges of prophecy beginning to fray. The old oaths no longer hold the way they once did. And far below, Loki opens his eyes. He is still bound, but not broken. And in his chest the fire waits. Day the rope snaps. It did not begin with thunder. It began with a sound so small it might have been nothing. A drop of venom missing the bowl. A shudder through the stone. A blink. Then came the crack. Deep beneath the mountain, where even time moved slowly, a thread snapped. It was not the serpent's strike, not Sigyn's trembling arms. It was simply too long. Too many centuries. Too much weight. The entrails of his son, withered, dry, stretched thin by centuries of hate, broke. Just one. But it was enough. Loki felt the shift, in his shoulder first, then his chest, then his breath. For the first time in an age he moved, the serpent hissed and a final drop struck his face. But this time he did not twist in pain, he smiled. Sigyn gasped, the bowl slipping from her hands, shattering on the stone. Loki stood, not fully free, not yet, but one hand, one wrist, free. And fire rushed in through that wound like breath into dry tinder. Above in Midgard, the ground cracked. Mountains groaned, oceans heaved, a tree fell that had never fallen. Children spoke in voices not their own. Wolves howled, not in hunger, but in warning. The earth was no longer quiet. In Asgard, Odin's ravens scattered. One did not return. Heimdall rose from his watchtower, his hand already on the Gjallarhorn. He had not blown it. Not yet. But his lips were close. And in Jotunheim, a ship began to slide from the shore. Its hull was made not of wood, but of nails of the dead. The ship of prophecy. The ship that sails only once, and across it stood the giants, waiting, watching, ready. And beneath it all, Loki pulled his second hand free. The mountain began to tremble. He looked at Sigyn, his eyes burning with something old. Not hate. Not yet, but certainty. And he said quietly, "It begins now." The horn is sounded. There are sounds that shape the world. The cry of the first wolf, the clash of the first sword, the silence of a god's last breath. But this sound was older, deeper, not born from lips but from destiny itself. When Heimdall raised the Gjallarhorn, he did not tremble. His hand was steady, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky had cracked open like a wound. He had waited an age for this, not in hope, not in dread, just in truth. And when he blew, the sound was not a note. It was a calling, a shuddering wave that tore through clouds and stone and bone. It echoed in Valhalla, it echoed in Helheim, it echoed through the roots of Yggdrasil itself. The 9 realms heard it and knew what it meant. Ragnarok had begun. In Asgard, the gods rose from their tables. No laughter now, no drink, only silence, only steel. Thor tightened the grip on his hammer, already turning toward the gate. His jaw clenched, his eyes blazing. He had always known he would not survive this, but he would meet it head on. Frigg wept quietly in the hall, not for herself, but for what would never return. Odin stood alone in the highest tower, his one eye closed, not in fear, but in finality. He had seen this moment the day he gave up his other eye. Now it stood before him, no longer a vision, but reality. He whispered, "To the end, then." In Jotunheim, the giants marched. Their ship, not for mate of the dead, slid into dark waters and caught the wind like a scream too long buried. And upon its deck stood a figure now unbound. Loki, cloaked in fire, his eyes alight not with rage but with clarity. He did not shout. He did not curse the gods. He simply raised one hand, and the sea began to split. In the depths, Ymir stirred. The Midgard serpent uncoiled, wrapping itself around the world one last time. The oceans boiled, the tides rose. Its hiss could be heard in the blood of every living thing. And in the forest, the great wolf Fenrir, his chains broken, threw back his head and howled. The sky shivered. All things moved now, all realms, all fates, all blades. And above it all, the tree groaned. Yggdrasil trembled. Leaves fell like stars. Its roots ached with the weight of what was coming. And still the horn echoed, on and on and on, because once sounded, it cannot be undone. The field of final names. It was not dawn. There was no sun. The sky was cracked open, bleeding lightless gray, as if the heavens themselves could not bear to witness what was coming. They gathered not because they wanted to, but because they must. Because the thread had unraveled. Because the fire had spread. Because the names written into the roots of Yggdrasil had reached their final lines. This was Vigrid, the field where prophecy ends. It stretched wider than sight, covered not in grass but in ash, the last dust of burned futures. And on one side the gods of Asgard, steel in their hands, resolve in their eyes, no illusions left. Odin atop his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, cloaked in ravens and silence. He did not speak to his warriors. He had spoken enough. Thor, already crackling with thunder, stood beside him like a storm barely contained. His breath misted in the air and Mjolnir pulsed like a heart too large for one world. Freya, without his sword, his eyes set forward. He would die, He knew it, but he had chosen to stand. Tyr, one arm and unshaken. Heimdall horn still ringing in his soul. And behind them, Einherjar, the chosen dead, the honored fallen, brought from Valhalla for this one final stand. And across the ash, Loki came, not in disguise, not in charm, but in truth, cloaked in fire, eyes burning with centuries of silence. And beside him, Fenrir, his jaws already bloody from breaking the last gate. Jörmungandr, circling in the far sky like a noose. Hel, cold and unblinking, not leading armies but watching, as a reckoner, not a soldier. Surtur, the fire giant with the sword that would burn worlds, and behind them the dead, the dishonored, the forgotten, marching not in anger but in certainty. No parley, no prayers. This was the day the world had whispered about since its first breath. Swords were drawn, horns were raised, names were spoken one last time, not for glory but for remembrance. And then they ran. The first crash of shield against shield shook the sky. Thor met the serpent, Odin met the wolf, Tyr met the hound of hell, and above it all, the tree began to die. When the gods fall, the battle had no beginning, only a crash, as if the 9 realms collapsed into a single heartbeat, and then split apart in violence. On the field of Vigrid, destiny was no longer distant. It had a face, it had a blade, it had an end. Odin met his fate first. He rode into Fenrir's path, Fundided, his cloak of ravens trailing like smoke behind him, his spear Gungnir burning with old runes. He struck once, true, but it was not enough. The wolf rose, the jaws widened, and in the space between inhale and scream, the Allfather fell. He did not cry out, he did not plead. He only disappeared between teeth and the sky dimmed. Thor, seeing his father swallowed, roared like a dying star. He turned to Jörmungandr, the world serpent, who rose to meet him like a wave carved from venom and shadow. They clashed, god and beast, thunder and sea. The hammer flew, the sky cracked, the serpent screamed. And at last Thor broke its skull, splintering heaven itself. But as he turned, the venom reached him. His breath stopped, his heart slowed, and the god of thunder took 9 steps through blood and ruin, then collapsed, his hammer falling from lifeless hands. Elsewhere, Freyr fought Surtur. No sword, only a stag-antlered blade, broken and old. He struck well, but fire has no heart to pierce. Surtur's flame engulfed him, and the god of peace was reduced to ash. Tyr, the god with one hand, met Garm, Hel's hound, at the gate of the dead. They tore into each other with divine rage, and died together, locked in jaws, neither giving ground. Heimdall found Loki. They did not speak. They had no words left. Their blades met, and for a moment, it was like watching fire and memory break each other apart. They struck, they bled, they killed. And the field was quiet, not from peace but from exhaustion. So many names spoken for the last time, so many stories burned shut. And as Surtur raised his sword once more, a flame as tall as the heavens, he brought it down. And the world began to burn, not just Asgard, not just Midgard, all of it. The tree cracked, the sky opened, the oceans boiled, the stars dimmed. This was not a battle. This was the death of a world. The ash in the light. The sword had fallen. The tree had cracked. The world once vibrant with myth and song was now silent ash. There were no gods left to sing, no wolves left to howl, no thunder in the sky. Only the smoke, rising slowly from the bones of what had been. Mountains were leveled. Oceans had swallowed cities. The stars themselves had dimmed as if they too had closed their eyes in mourning. And yet something remained. Not much, not loud. Just a flicker, a breath, a seed, curled into the heart of the ash, unburned. Beneath the roots of what once was Yggdrasil, a green shoot broke the soil, small, defiant, alive. And elsewhere in a hidden grove untouched by flame, 2 figures stirred. Lif, man and woman. Carried in secret through the fire by the tree's last whisper, hidden in the breath between endings. They awoke not with fear but with silence, and hand in hand they stepped into the grey light, not of a dying world, but of a beginning. And from the halls of hell a door opened, not in triumph, not in force, but because the world had reset, and through that door walked a figure long mourned, Baldr. The god of light returned, not blazing, but calm. His touch healed the grass beneath them, his breath stilled the wind. Behind him came Höður, no longer blind, no longer bowed. They walked without haste, without pride, because this was not victory, it was continuance. The sky began to mend. The stars returned, newer, younger, as if reborn, and far off something vast stirred. Not Yggdrasil as it was, but something new growing from its place, not with roots that bound, but with branches that reached. And though Odin was gone, and Thor was dust, and Loki's flame had faded, their stories remained, not carved in stone, but carried in whisper, in wind, in leaf. This was not the world as it had been, but it was a world once more, and that, perhaps, was enough. The light that lasts. The sky was pale now, not from fire but from morning, the kind of morning that does not rush but arrives softly, as if remembering how the world once began. The battle was over, the gods had fallen, and yet the world turned. The grass grew again, cautious but brave. Rivers found their courses through the broken earth. The wind, once filled with screams, now whispered names, not as wounds but as remembrance. In the grove where the last two humans stood, Leaf and Lifthrasir, life stirred. They built nothing grand, no thrones, no temples, only a small fire and a promise to pass on the memory of what had come before. They spoke the old names, they sang the old stories, and in doing so, they sowed the world again, not in conquest, not in fear, but in story. Bald walked the hills alone, the earth blooming in his footsteps. He did not seek a crown, he did not raise a kingdom. He simply walked, watching, healing, remaining. For he had known death, and now he knew what it meant to return. And from far beneath, in places where flame once ruled, no wrath rose. Because Loki was gone, not defeated, not erased, just finished. A name no longer whispered in vengeance, but in understanding. Because even lies have roots in truth, and even endings make way for light. High above it all, where the sky bends toward stars, something moved, a branch. A new tree, not Yggdrasil, but kin to it. Younger, wiser, growing. Its roots did not bind, its leaves did not whisper prophecy, only peace. And for the first time in an age, the world did not wait for war. It listened. And so it ends, not with the sword, not with a scream dealt, but with a quiet breath, and the truth that all things, broken or burned, can begin again. If there is one to tell the story, and one to remember it. The end of Loki's last lie, the binding beneath the earth, and the beginning of everything after.